Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tabernacle Township Committee meeting for July 22nd, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have the sunshine notice. This meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of July 22nd, 2019 was sent to the Central Record, Burlington County Times, and Courier Post. Posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall and has remained continuously posted as required notices under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have roll call. Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Lee. Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Yates. Mayor Barton.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment on agenda items, except the first reading ordinances. Anyone like to comment? Mr. Brooks, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. Commenting on resolutions 2019-84 and 85 regarding the application to the DOT to repave Oakshade Road and Crickets Mill. My comment is that by the 2018 Township Road evaluation, the road most in need of repair, as you well know, is Carranza Road. Got a rating of 58. Oakshade has a rating of 74. Crickets Mill 86. So by objective standards, your own objective standards, the standards which were made to avoid subjective decisions, Carranza Road should be finished. And based on the fact that we got a grant of roughly $245,000 to do the first 6/10, and there's 6/10 remaining, a grant of roughly $250,000 would seem to finish it off. $250,000 for Carranza Road is less than that needed for Oakshade or Crickets Mill, as reported in the 2018 Township cost estimate. So I'm surprised, I'm disappointed that Carranza Road is not on this list. It should be a road of first concern. As you all know, it's been a long time waiting to get that road done. You're only halfway done. You should finish it. Now I know that there's a pending infrastructure grant from DOT, as I've stated. The last 2 public meetings, it seems the likelihood of that coming through is nil. It's a weak application, not expressing any of the attributes of the road, its historical nature, the fact that it's got jurisdiction in 2 townships, which might complicate it and necessitate state assistance. And I've said all this before, and I don't really want to say it all again. It's all on the record. But there are no pictures on there. The grant application was probably double, if not triple, the length that it needed to be. And ultimately, what you applied for was roughly a $2 million grant for a state budget that's about $8 million. So the likelihood of it being funded, of Tabernacle getting roughly a quarter of all the state funds allocated for this grant, seems real thin to me. The prudent thing, I think, is to make plans, other plans, to pave the second part of Carranza Road. And that plan should be to follow your road improvement plan, which declares Carranza Road most in need of work, and put in the DOT grant for it. Period. It's just that simple. I also have a comment on Resolution 2019-91 regarding the refund for the halls. I couldn't follow the math. I understand from the resolution that they applied for a construction permit. I have 30 seconds, I presume. They applied for a construction permit, and it was then, for whatever reason, a second one or an alternate one was applied for. So a refund on the first is being sought. I understand it conceptually, but the math just didn't make sense to me based on what's in the resolution. So when you address that, if you could clarify that, and it should be pretty straightforward, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Yes, sir.
Hi.
Please come forward, state your name and address, please.
Brandon Larney, 118 Moores Meadow Road. I live at the end of Carranza Road that hasn't been finished. Same thing with Stuart just said. It's I don't see how a road that needs repair should be put second or third to something that just needs cosmetic updating. So, and even just the cost of vehicle maintenance, just driving up and down the road every single day. Just to try to make a living, I'm spending most of it in car repairs. Just to go to work.
Any other comments?
No, that's it.
Thanks for your time. Anyone else in the public? Yes, sir.
John Ingram, 71 Moore's Meadow Road, also again with the Carranza. I know I'm newer to the township of Tabernacle, but I've been here just over 2 years, and for over 2 years, all I've heard is Carranza Road. So it's still not done, and especially now the way it is done, it's a blind curve. So if you're in a truck, you can see over the high grass, and I understand the high grass, keep it natural. If you're in a car, a lower vehicle, you can't see around the curve. People are coming down the road, you can't see who's coming. You hit that unpaved area, it's bumpy as heck. Your car skids. So it skids into another car, you've got a major accident, head on, head on. So not only that, it's a safety concern with people, but if and when we get snow, there's snow plows down there, they hit one of those bumps, there goes that plow. And I'd hate to see a township vehicle go out, and then we lose plowing in the town because of Carranza not being paved. So, and then my only other question is an update on Verizon. I'm sure that might be discussed or covered later, but that's my question also.
The Verizon broadband. Okay. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Ingram, I have a question for you. You mentioned grass. Whereabouts in the road are you referring to?
It's on the right side. When you're going down right there where the pavement stops, it's probably about this high. And like I said, if you're in a truck, you can see over it. If you're in a car, you cannot see around that curve.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct,
you.
Mike.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Mrs. Brooks?
Go ahead.
Fran Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. Good evening. Not to sound like a broken record, but it's shocking that you would put resolutions 84 and 85 on this to do Oakshade Road and Prickett's Mill Road, because neither of those roads need repaving. I don't know if any of you have traveled down them. It's hard for me to believe that Mr. Guzzi traveled on them and makes a recommendation that they need maintenance or repaving, because they don't. There's no comparison. You can't make a comparison between those two roads and Moore's Meadow. And it's time to finish Moore's Meadow. Wouldn't it be nice to just be free of this issue? And you're applying for over $800,000. That you're asking the state to give you over $800,000 for two projects when you could just finish Moore's Meadow, as Stuart said, for $250,000. And it's time to just do it. I keep trying in my truly rational moments to understand, Mr. Guzzi, how you could recommend those two roads for repaving when you know, you have to know, and you do know how bad the remaining 6/10 of a mile really is, and how dangerous it actually is, and that you're suggesting that it should be these two other roads, Prickett's Mill and Oakshade, should be repaved. There's just no justification for it. And it's time to get the road done. And I've been told, actually Stuart and I were told by Mr. Moore, Mr. Barton, that you want to get that road done. So why would you, after commissioning or spending, I don't know how much money to get that rating report, road rating report, that you would go back on your word and support these two resolutions to do two roads that absolutely don't need to be repaved unless you're serving some other people in this township. The second issue I want to bring up, it just goes on and on with that, the Carranza Road problem, and the committees and the staff's recalcitrance, and I think a consultant, engineer, to finishing Carranza Road. The other question that I have, or issue I have, is with 2019-86, Mr. Carr. I understand that Mr. Carr is a relative of Mr. Kramer's, and he is not your son's brother-in-law. He's not the. I'm sorry.
He's not a relative of mine.
Well, yes, but you're by marriage, there is a relationship, so there is nepotism, it implies nepotism, and it's highly questionable why you would hire somebody who is your son's brother-in-law, because there's still a close relationship there. And regardless of and there is a nepotism policy.
Read it.
And I did read it, actually, I read things very carefully.
You wanna
And
close
I
your
think you
comments,
will
Mr.
have
Brooks?
supervisory control over a person you are by marriage related to. So it would seem to me that that would be a very bad decision for the township to make. So I just bring that to your attention, and you should try to cut down on the nepotism.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Judy Church, and I live at 108 Morse Meadow Road. And I am, as others have spoken, a resident on that road, and I also have business there as well. And the condition of the remaining unpaved Carranza Road continues to be a detriment. It has a negative impact not only on our own personal vehicles, as others have mentioned, but it also has an impact on farm trucks, machinery, as well as employees who have to travel that road. And I've come tonight, as others have, to simply ask, almost to implore you, to please see that that other portion of Carranza Road is completed. It is such a travesty to see that road left the way that it is, unfinished. And it is a danger. And I know that y'all have come and you have put some gravel and thrown some stuff at the potholes, but that's like just kind of putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. You know, it just needs to be fixed. And I think that needs to be your priority before any other roads.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments for the public? Okay, we'll close the public portion. Ordinance on first reading. There'll be a public hearing on August 26, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. The first one is 2019-6, an ordinance to create the position of purchasing agent in the Township of Tabernacle. Any motion? Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Ordinance 2019-7, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration by adding Section 32 Executive Session Minutes. A motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Resolution 2019-83 authorizing approval to renew the plenary retail consumption license for PPDA Incorporated, which is the Village Pub. A motion?
So moved.
Second? I'll second it. Any discussion required? If not, a roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mayor Barton, excuse me.
That's right. 2019-84, authorize approval to submit a grant application to execute a grant contract with the NJ DOT for the Oak Shade Road Phase 2 repaving. A motion?
Mayor, may I suggest Mr. Guzzi addressing the concerns
Yeah,
on
and,
these roads as to why
and,
my 3 minutes are up?
yeah, but Kim, if I may, before we do that, for the benefit of the folks who are here that haven't been here in the past, Carranza Road is shared by 2 townships. To the east, it is Tabernacle Township. To the west, it is Shimon Township. Tabernacle Township put its best foot forward and used our grant money to pave what you have seen already. Half of that paving benefits Shimon Township. We have met with Shimon Township. We've asked them to pave their half of the township road, similar to what we've done with other roads in the township, such as Tucker Road, right, Doug?
Yes.
We did a share there. They chose to apply for an infrastructure grant to the NJDOT. We did it jointly. We contacted our legislators. They're in the 8th district, we're in the 9th district. We asked them for their support, and that application went to NJDOT. I met with Chemung Township Mayor and their administrator, and Carranza Road is not a priority to them. They have other roads that they feel are in greater need. So if we were to take our grant money and finish Carranza Road, we will have paved 100% of Chemung Township's responsibility for their road. And I can tell you from sitting on this committee, there are people in this room that if we did this on any other road would chastise this committee for doing that. Yes, I want it done, and I have never gone back on my word on this. I have stated from the beginning that Chemung is responsible for 50% of this road, not the Tabernacle Township residents. If the committee should decide otherwise, that they want to pave both sides of that road, it would have to be a consensus decision from this committee, which is something that I personally do not support. I think Chemung Township, the pressure should be on them. You should be at their meetings asking them to pave their side of their road. But with that, Kim, we'll ask Mr. Guzzi your question.
I just wanted them to address the comments that were made, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. Going back a couple of years when Carranza Road has been discussed, it was suggested that we apply for a DOT grant for Carranza Road. We applied for one section and we did get that, and then we applied for the discretionary grant, which again was suggested by some members of the public that we go ahead and do that. We applied. It has to be a joint application with Chemung Township because half the roads in Chemung Township. So we made that application. It's been up at DOT for almost a year now. The latest word I had was that it was getting sent up to the legislature for potentially getting funded so that we could, potentially get that grant and finish paving Carranza Road, not just to Moore's Meadow, but beyond. So while we have a pending grant with DOT for Carranza Road, it did not seem prudent to then apply again for Carranza Road and have two simultaneous grants for Carranza Road. The other issue is with the DOT grant for Carranza Road, we would need to get Chemung's permission to apply for that. And again, we'd be using grant money for Tabernacle in order to pave that portion of the road which is in Chemung Township. There's also an issue, I believe, and Rodney could probably address this, with using local money, Tabernacle local money, to pave Chemung's roads.
Yes, I believe if we did it through a capital project without having jurisdiction on it, the bondholders of the township funds could have an issue with it. And then it'd be the improper use of capital funds. So.
And that's with the consent from the other municipality? If you had a consent from the other municipality and had a consent from the governing body here, would they care?
Not sure about that. That would be legally something we would have to look into. But
Like you have two governing bodies of both.
You're dealing with bond funds
Right.
that are, somebody's put up with the collateral being township assets.
Right, no, I get that. You have consent from both the municipality that is applying, like us, and then Chemung Township. I would think that would be enough.
With borrowed funds, I'm not
You'd have to
sure.
ask them.
You'd have to ask. We'd have to get a bond attorney to give the legal opinion on that. It would be less of a problem if you wanted to raise it in the budget as straight up in the budget as capital.
Right.
If you wanted to add 2 more pennies to next year's budget to raise enough funds for it, or 4 more pennies, whatever it would be, and put it in the capital section of the budget, I don't think that would be much of a problem. But it would be a one-year expenditure.
Dan, I want to go back to your comment regarding the first grant that's pending. Where does that stand? I may have missed that.
So my last conversation with DOT, which was about a month ago, was that they were sending it up to the legislature for funding. So the legislature would have to approve it and fund it.
That's in this budget that they just passed?
DOT sent it up July 1st. We're sending it up July 1st. Basically the end of their fiscal year.
Okay. So I guess my question is what constitutes approval from DOT, or how does that work? I just don't know.
This is a discretionary grant, so it's a little different than the normal grants that we apply for. In this case, this is a DOT recommendation that's sent up, and it has to be funded outside of the normal grant cycle that DOT issues for municipal improvements.
Okay.
And that cycle ended this month, correct?
So what we've applied for with the Oak Shade Brickets Mills is the normal, the typical annual grant cycle. And those applications were submitted, they were due and were submitted last week. This resolution has to be passed by the governing body, or these two resolutions have to be passed by the governing body within a month of that submission and then sent up to DOT, or else those grants will just die, those applications will die.
But the likelihood of those getting approved versus the one that is pending now, what's the likelihood of those getting approved?
Well, we've applied for, we sort of over-apply when we apply, so we apply for more than we think we're going to get.
Right.
So the likelihood is if we get a grant, it's going to be for substantially less than what we've asked for, but then we have the flexibility to use the money in, you know, in either or both of those roads.
Okay.
But it's hard to say. Typically, you know, we get that grant a couple years in a row, and then we don't get it for a year, maybe two, and then we get it again for a year or two. So there's really no way to know.
Dan, has that grant averaged around 250,000?
Yeah,
Is that the kind of number we're talking?
Yes, a little over 200,000.
And so we did apply one of those grants to Carranza Road.
Right, and in that case, Chemung agreed to be a joint applicant on that, or give us consent to apply. So they didn't use their grant application, they submitted a separate grant application, but they consented to our application because the road was in two different jurisdictions. Like you said, like we did with Tuckerton Road. In that case, we both applied, we both got the grant, we were able to do the whole road. In this case, they didn't, so we were only to do, you know, able to do half the road. And DOT won't allow us to pave half the road from the center line over. We can't, you know, pave one lane but not the other.
That would make sense. That's just logical, God forbid. If you don't utilize a grant, what happens to the grant? Like, for example, you're awarded the grant, and for whatever reason, we don't utilize the grant, what happens to that grant money? And
The money goes back into the pool.
Okay.
We don't get the grant money.
Okay.
The grant money has to be used for whatever you applied for. So again, with Oak Shade Road, we're going to finish Oak Shade Road with this grant if we receive it.
Right.
But felt like it might not take all of that money that we get to finish Oak Shade, so we added Prickett's Mill as well. That way, if we get a grant that covers the rest of Oak Shade Road, rather than letting the rest of it go to waste, we'll be able to move to Prickett's Mill and use it on Prickett's Mill.
When are the grants due?
They were due last week.
Okay.
They were due and submitted last week.
So when's the next opportunity to be able to apply for a grant?
So this cycle will go probably here before the end of the year, and then most likely they'll announce another round of funding sometime next year.
And those awards will be announced when?
It's hard to tell. Oftentimes, we hear right before, you know, beginning of November.
League of Municipalities, go figure. Okay.
End of October. Yeah, end of October.
Does that satisfy your question, Ken?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to explain the rationale.
Yeah.
So everyone can understand.
And Doug, we are maintaining our side of Carranza, and the mayor of Chemung.
We're maintaining both sides. Wherever there's a hole, we maintain it. We don't go up there and say, oh, this isn't showing.
Okay.
We have some liability once we know there's a hole there to take care of it.
Okay. And of course, everyone has the right to call Chemung to report any potholes on their side or any repairs that need to be done.
Dan, any idea when you're going to hear from DOT about the grant that's pending now?
No,
Is there a deadline?
no.
It's whenever.
Yes.
It could be 2 years from now.
It's out of DOT's hands now. What they've told me, it's been sent up to the legislature, so it's up to the legislature. And that's why we reached out to.
But who exactly, I guess what I'm trying to understand is who at the legislature makes that decision? Is it a committee? Is it?
I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of that, honestly. And DOT is not, you know, they don't give you a lot of information. It's full, you know.
our plan for Cranes Road is we're depending on a grant that we don't know when we get response from. We don't know what the process is in terms of, I'm not pointing the finger at you at all,
No,
but I'm trying to understand the process.
We
That's
can
what we're
work-
getting at. Like, I've got a meeting on Friday with somebody from the legislature, and I can't take this to them and say, what's the story, if I don't understand what the process is. Okay, I appreciate your comment. I appreciate your input. Thank you.
And Dan, this is a different grant with these two, correct, than you applied with Carranza?
Correct.
Correct?
That's
So
correct.
you couldn't apply for these two while the other one was in and lump them together? Since there
Well,
was
we had applied for the entire, discretionary grant was a joint application with Shamong.
Okay.
Applied for the entire, the entire road and the balance of the road down to the memorial, basically. So no, to have two applications for the same thing running parallel doesn't seem to make sense. But if we're not going to get that, if we don't get that other grant, and if we get some sort of final word, then we can look at applying again, at the next year's funding cycle to apply for Carranza Road. But again, we're going to use Tabernacle funds to pave half of Shamong's road, unless Shamong decides that they would like to participate and use that as a grant.
And that's in 6 months, for the most part.
No, it's probably closer to the year, next spring, I would say, that'll be the announcement. They'll announce the awards probably before the end of the year.
Oh,
but
so
the next round of funding will be next.
Following budget year. Okay.
And that's if it's a year that we get the funding, correct?
Correct.
It could be an off year for us.
It could be. So the other option is local funding and resolving the issue of jurisdiction because we don't own half the road.
This committee raised a question, and there was never a question that was brought up amongst the five of us about doing a simultaneous grant. I'm disappointed that this road still isn't done, but I guess what I'm getting at is that we didn't have dialogue within the committee about what to do in terms of, understand. And I will probably learn more about the grant process tonight than I have probably known about it all. But I guess my point is that, Mr. Barr, you mentioned that you're not in favor of paving a road that belongs to Shamong Township either. I'm not sure I am. But I will tell you this, we've got residents that are here tonight, we've got residents that are on that road, we have a committeeman that lives on that road, and I'm embarrassed at the fact that we're going to wait a year, or we have to wait a year, in order to get the damn road paved. It's just, it's disappointing. I'm sorry, but it's disappointing that we're still talking about it. Dan, I appreciate your efforts in putting these two grant proposals together for O'Shea Road and for Cricket's Mill.
Doug, when we put that grant in for Grant Road, did we ask Shamong to partner with us like we had on Tucker?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
And they
I met with Senator Connor and the 8th District Office staff over in Shamong. The idea of doing the whole road was from Senator Connor. He thought we should put in for all of the blacktop portion of it. Thought we should swing for that, and then whatever we got, we got.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about the discretionary grant, the grant that we used to pave the portion that we did.
The grant that we did, we applied for with Shamong's approval of allowing us to apply for it.
So we tried to do the same thing we did at Tucker, except they didn't want to use their funding.
Right, so they didn't apply for funding. When we did Tuckerton,
That's when we did it together.
we each did a sister grant for the road. In this case, all we got from Shamong was an interlocal agreement that said Tabernacle was allowed to apply for grant money for our road and to pave our road if they receive it.
It's just a consent agreement, which they would do anyway because they're not dropping a dime on it. Doesn't matter to them.
Now, on Tucker Road, we both applied
Right. It
simultaneously.
was money that came from both sides, because
Right.
it benefited Shamong Township. I get it.
So their priority was not Carranza Road, it was another road.
Yes.
Or we would have done the same thing we did with Tucker Road.
Correct.
Yes.
We asked.
Any other questions? Okay, we're on ordinance 2019-6. I'm sorry, 84. 2019, resolution 2019-84, authorize approval to submit a grant application, execute a grant contract with the New Jersey Department of Transportation for the O'Shea Road Phase 2 paving, repaving. Do we have a motion?
And just to be clear, this has already been submitted, the deadline's passed, you can't make a change, so it's either we approve it or it dies.
Correct, the application does.
Okay. So just want to make sure we're crystal clear that nothing can be changed or modified.
Well, we cannot get the grant. That's the change.
I'm sorry, what was
We
that?
cannot get the grant. You could apply for the grant, but we may not get it.
Correct, but what I'm saying to you is, as we sit here tonight, we can't say to Dan, never mind, change this to Carranza Road. He said this has already been submitted, the deadline is passed, and that's what I'm saying, it's either you approve this.
Right, but as I understand it, you've got to have consent from the committee in order for the grant application to be completed.
We have to have these two resolutions approved within 30 days of the submission of the application. So if
Or
we
the
don't,
application null and void.
or the application will just die.
Right.
Thank you. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
A second? I'll second it, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. I guess we're gonna lose that grant? Is that what happens here?
That grant will, it'll be scrapped.
It'll be deemed withdrawn.
Yeah, it'll be withdrawn.
So that
So we'll have no opportunity for,
$250,000 can go to another township,
Yeah.
and Tabernacle Township will lose
that's what
roughly
happened.
$250,000 grant opportunity. Okay, resolution 2019-84, authorize approval to submit a grant application and execute a grant contract with the New Jersey Department, 2019-85, authorized the approval to submit a grant application and execute a grant contract with the NJ DOT for the Cricket Mills Road repaving project. Have a motion?
I'll also make this motion.
Second? I'll second it. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, well, we just saved the state of New Jersey about $250,000 that some other municipality will, I'm sure, be happy to receive. Resolution 2019-86, authorize appointment of part-time public works laborer, Robert E. Carr III.
Do you have Mr. Lang address that, please? Since a question was brought up about this resolution right here.
Yes.
Yes, please.
About nepotism.
Yep.
The township does have a nepotism ordinance and has language also included in its personnel manual. It's very explicit in defining relative. As it was explained, as I heard, the person in question who's a prospective hire for the township is a sister or daughter-in-law's husband, and the daughter-in-law's brother? Right, daughter-in-law's brother, excuse me, of course. Daughter-in-law's brother, which does not constitute a relative under the meaning of the ordinance. So, in general, the personnel manual and the ordinance stand for the proposition of barring, prohibiting nepotism and those close relationships where one would think on its face, at least there might be an appearance of impropriety or the potential for some favoritism or bias in the administration or supervision of an employee due to blood relations. The ordinance also goes on to specifically identify what it determines to be a blood relative or family member, and it's explicit, and it does not include a daughter-in-law's brother. So it's not a violation of our own code or personnel manual to make an offer of employment to, and as I understand it, it's Mr. Kramer's daughter-in-law's brother.
Thank you, Peter. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mayor, prior to voting, I need to indicate to the committee that Mr. Carr works on a cranberry operation that's part of the Ocean Spray Growers Cooperative, which I'm part of, and I don't feel as though that I'm in a position to vote on this. I will be abstaining from the vote because of a perceived conflict, as Mr. Carr is a cranberry grower with a cooperative, as am I, so I'm not going to be voting on this.
Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Abstain.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-87, authorize appointment of part-time fire inspector Ernest Joseph Cogley. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion required?
Mr. Barton, I'm not going to be voting on this either. Mr. Mobley is my golf partner on Wednesday nights. I hope he's a better inspector than he is a golfer. So I won't be voting on this either.
Thank you, Steve. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Abstain.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-88, authorize award of contract for the 2019 CDBG improvements. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion required?
Can we get a summary from Doug?
This is for the concrete work and the ramp work outside the municipal building here, which is one part of the grant. Second part will be the new chairlift. So this is the exterior portion of the grant.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-89, authorize the approval for special items of revenue and appropriation, Chapter 159 for the 2019 Community Development Block Grant Award. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. 2019-90 resolution, authorize township engineer to prepare plans and specifications to solicit the bids for the Flat Road storm damage repair. No motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second. I have a question.
Yes, Steve.
Can someone summarize for me what's going on with the Flat Road storm damage repair? This is the first I've heard of it.
This was, I think, June 19th. The storm, I think it was June 19th. There was a significant washout there. The pipe was undermined, and a section of the road is washed out, basically. If you've been by, it's still closed. We did go out and get quotes from contractors for the work, and substantially over the bid threshold. So we are looking to go out to bid. The project will involve replacing the pipe and repairing the road, basically.
Is it, okay. There's no bridge work involved?
It's not a bridge. We had discussions with the county, if that's where you're going, and they have, that's not their pipe. It's less than 48 inches, so it's not theirs. It's 42.
Thanks, Dan.
No, we tried.
You know where I was going.
Yep,
We're
I
right.
did.
A roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-91, authorize the Finance Department to refund construction permit fee V/2002 L11.01. That's the block and lot. So a motion?
I'll make the motion and then also ask for some comments regarding the public comments.
Okay, second.
Second.
Doug, can you address the fees on that, or is that something Mr. Moore would have to explain?
I'm going to attempt to.
Okay.
I believe the plans, they changed the plans for the building, or changed what they were building. So there is a review fee and a portion of what I believe the state fee may be in there also. So I'm looking at what the differences is. The 40 cents I can't help you with. I'm going to say it's a percentage, but I don't. There's a percentage they're allowed to keep.
20%, right? Township refunds all but 20% of the non-refundable plan review and a training fee.
and then the balance would be refundable. So it appears that Mr. Boyd has indicated that that amount reflects the application of the construction permit fee that was charged, less 20% less the training fee.
So that should be where you get on that 40.
Doesn't
This
add
was
up.
for the footing and foundation work.
Yes.
Any other questions? So we're going to be reimbursing $237.40, is that correct? Do some of the fees come out of it?
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to figure out, because I got $217 based on the 20%.
Well, 305 less 20% is 244.
Right.
What is it, a $5 fee? Is it, or a $7 fee, $7.40, $7.60? Because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. I'll make sure we double check the amount.
I mean, if you want, we can table this to the next meeting and get a clear explanation of what the number is.
If you feel more comfortable doing it that way, that's fine.
Committee in favor of table this till we get the exact amount?
That's fine, Mayor. Or at least the method of how they got to it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to
I apologize for your
check. That's okay. So Doug, you'll check with Mr. Boyd.
Yes.
Clarify that that 237.40 is the exact amount and have an explanation of how we got to that number.
Okay.
Because the 20% doesn't seem to get us there.
Yeah,
Are we
you're
sitting
right.
second on that?
Yes. Is
You
it
made the
motion
motion.
to adopt?
Huh?
You
Yeah.
made the
I did?
motion. Yeah.
Well, in that case, I'll withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
So Sam, you made the motion to
Kim
withdraw?
seconded the motion.
No, I
Oh,
did.
you did, okay. You
Kim
seconded
seconded.
it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pending review from the
Review.
construction office.
Okay,
We'll have a complete explanation next meeting.
Okay.
We'll call it, Sean.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes, approval of the bills, have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second. Oh, wait a second, is that reimbursement in this bill list?
No, it's handled separately, pursuant to the resolution.
Just making sure.
Good catch, Kim.
So we have a motion and a second, Sean, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Approval of the minutes for June 10th, 2019. This is the closed session minutes. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Approval of the minutes for June 24th, 2019. This is the regular and the closed section. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Reports, Mr. Guzzi?
Just a couple of things. The road program is finished up. We're just having some punch list items that need to be finalized so we can close that job out. And we've been working with Doug on a number of drainage projects. We have been getting socked with a few storms this spring and summer. So we've been working on some drainage projects, just putting some cost estimates together and expect to come to you, I would think, at the upcoming meeting to talk about maybe doing a drainage project to address these items.
Thank you, Mr. Covey. Any questions for Mr. Covey? Mr. Kramer?
I'm going to continue a little bit on those drainage projects. I'm going to name them. We'll be working on the ones that we had left over from the last round is the flooding at Moore and Richter. We have an issue on Hawkins Road by the firehouse that we need to address that before we repave that. We've been working and doing some test boring out at the Sonway Basin, and that will probably be handled in-house by the department. We have a number of sinkholes showing up at Burr Trail in the pipelines that run down there, and we are working with Dan and getting a camera in there to see if we can, what exactly it is and whether we can repair them from the inside. Also working on some drainage and site work out on El Dorado to handle those drainage, Old Indian Mills Road, and as part of the road project, we're doing some additional drainage on Kramer Road to address one of the issues there also. So that's, we have some money left over from previous road and drainage projects that we'll probably be using towards that, but we'll probably be talking to you about some funding for the balance of that. The department took down the old gazebo. We're moving forward on that. The new one was delivered. We're working with Dan and getting the concrete work set up so they can put in the footings and the concrete slab for that, and then the department will be putting up the gazebo from that.
Do you have a completion date on that?
We hope to be done by September.
Okay, good.
Depending on how long it takes to get the concrete work. That's we've been working on some down trees issue. We have some additional tree work to do that we'll be quoting here shortly. We had a large tree go down on Old Indian Mills Road Thursday in that storm. I want to thank Atlantic City Electric for taking the lead on that. It was on their wires, but they pretty much did a lot of the work and left us to clean up what was left in the road. So we do appreciate Atlantic City Electric stepping up and doing that. Also tonight, the rescue squad has a report whenever you want to come in.
Okay. How about, you want to talk about our demo on Moore Road?
We are the Moore Road residents that litigation for a number of years the house is down at this point in time. The garage is coming down here shortly, and that should be done. And when the contractor's off, we'll be cleaning up the yard with the department and bringing that back up to a presentable site.
So Doug, we will lien that property, is that what will happen?
Yes, we will.
And so the property owner will have to pay that lien and the back taxes in order to keep that property?
That is correct.
Okay. If not, it'll go to tax sale.
Correct.
Okay. Good. Any questions for Mr. Kramer? Mr. Lang, you're up.
Mayor, we did receive 3 responses from the adjoining property owners to Eric's Causeway Road. Per the direction of the committee, we did inquire from those property owners as to their interest in purchasing the township right-of-way to the center line of the road. That applied to 3 different property owners. 2 of the property owners declined the invitation. One of the property owners offered a token amount for the road. So in essence, they rejected, I think, the desire or the idea that they would pay an appreciable amount for the right-of-way. I think that the committee has to gauge the public purpose associated with that road, potentially debate again the merit of maintaining it or closing it, given the issues that surround it, including ATV use, its utility as a public road, its proximity to other roads and intersections in the area, and any access issues that would be presented. So if the, could list that for a workshop, or we could please discuss that and give me some final direction on whether we're going to move forward with that vacation or otherwise. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Would the committee like to discuss this tonight, or should I schedule it for the September workshop?
Why don't we schedule it for then, Joe? That's
You
mine.
okay with that? David, you okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll schedule this for the September workshop. Thank you, Mr. Knight. Before we do the committee, Chief Jackson, you want to come up and give your report? Thank you.
The quarterly report for 2019, the second quarter report for the Tabernacle Rescue Squad. We were dispatched 259 times. The types of emergencies: 10 fire calls, 42 motor vehicle accidents, 71 medical emergencies, 2 overdoses, 21 breathing problems, 5 cardiac arrests, 15 cardiac emergencies, 19 unconscious patients, 1 trauma, 10 strokes, 5 standbys, 8 rehab assignments, 11 psychs, and 40 falls. We logged 4,885.5 volunteer hours. That's duty crew standby hours. Our average response time is 4 minutes and 19 seconds. Our crew responses, our duty crew responded 202 times. We used the second rig 22 times, the third rig 4 times, the rescue 13 times, and the rehab 8. We served 168 patients. We went to virtual Memorial 66 times, virtual Marlton 18, virtual Voorhees 14, Deborah 3. Lords, Burlington County, we're now virtual Willingboro 5 times, and Cooper twice. We provided mutual aid 57 times to Southampton, 7 times to Chemung, once to Woodland, 9 times to Medford, 7 times to Pemberton, 3 times to Lumberton, once to Mount Holly. We received no mutual aid during the second quarter. Special events and standbys were the Seneca and Olson graduations, the Memorial Day parade in the escort of Edwin Mikulowski. Career Day at the Olson Middle School, EMS week station tours for both Tabernacle Elementary and the Olson Middle School, the Olson Middle School car wash, the SAD program at Seneca, MCI and extrication training for the virtual EMT program, standby at a track event at OEMS. We were also re-inspected by the New Jersey Department of Health, OEMS, and the New Jersey EMS Council. That's for our credentials and also for our rigs. We actually had to take each rig to Trenton, to the office, and they had to come out and inspect all the equipment, make sure everything was valid, good, all the equipment worked, and everything was in proper order, which is required. I believe it's every 3 years they have to go up and be re-inspected, so we finished that. Any other questions?
You forgot your barbecue.
Well, technically that's the third quarter, but we had the barbecue this weekend, and it was very successful. We sold out again, so we raised some money for the Historical Society and for the Rescue Squad, which was nice. It was a great community event, very good turnout. It was a very hot day, and I think that kind of helps us out sometimes, because who wants to cook and heat their house up? It was hot enough as it is. So I do have a copy you want me to give this to LaShawn, and the first quarter one I also have.
Okay. Any questions from the committee for Chief Jackson?
George, how many people sold out?
I think it was 450, 430. Yeah.
Was it hot in your building or community center?
Towards the end of the day, it started to get warm, but it actually, for as hot as it wasn't bad. Yeah, listen, it was better than being outside. Poor Keith stayed outside and cooked corn all day, and by the end of the day, we made him come in and just sit in the chair for a while. He looked like a bubble.
So you split that 50-50 with the
Yes.
rescue squad, or
Yeah,
with
the Historical
Society?
Society? Yes.
3375 is my calculation, that's great.
Yeah, roughly that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Okay. Committee reports, Committeeman Lee.
I've got a couple things. I did not know about Fly Road, which is why I asked the question. I haven't been spending a ton of time on Fly Road lately, so I was not aware of that. So that's what raised that question. I wanted to clarify my vote regarding the 2 DOT grants. Mr. Guzzi spent a lot of time putting these two grants together, and I recognize that. And I recognize that we took ourselves out of the running in terms of these two grant proposals for Priggett's Mill and O'Shea. But I also will have to say that at least 18 to 24 months ago, I made a commitment, public commitment, that I wanted to get Cranes Road paved. And I even said publicly I wasn't going to vote on another road project that wasn't Cranes Road. And I recognize that we left money on the table probably if indeed we were to get the two grants. But out of principle, I could not find myself spending money on O'Shea Road and Priggett's Mill Road and leaving the committee at the end of the year knowing that one of the things I didn't get finished was Carranza. But I made a commitment to do it, and it still won't get done while I'm here, but at least a message. I'm hopeful that this committee recognizes the need for getting Carranza Road done one way or the other. I recognize that Chemung Township owns it, but sometimes we need to do what's best for our residents. If it means we have to pave Chemung's Road, so be it, because our commitment is indeed to the residents, irregardless of what the jurisdiction may be. It was a very difficult vote for me because I think Dan's done an awful lot of work in putting this together, so Dan, I'm sorry for that. But I was not in a position to be able to support it at this time, given the commitment that I made long ago for Carranza Road. I also wanted to just mention, or actually kind of ask, a lot of the towns, our neighboring towns, have some sort of a notification for different types of emergencies that are happening. For example, I get notification from Woodland Township about like roads being closed and that type of thing. It's some sort of a program that I think that they have, and Surf City has it. There's a couple of towns that have it. So my point is, do we have anything like that, or is there a way for us to be able to communicate to the residents through
Nexel system?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Nexel.
Do we have that capability?
We would have to talk to Bob Sunbury, I would say.
Yeah.
He would be the best one to talk to.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't all know that we had.
Anyway, I think it's sometimes it's a pain, but I think more information is better than not enough. There was a question regarding Verizon. I think you'd asked that, I believe. Mr. Ingram, correct?
Yes.
The portion of Moore's Meadows that you live on, that is to be done in phase 2, I think, which is the same as Sam's, which is to be completed by the end of the year. Actually, yeah, have you seen any activity on Moore's
Lines
Meadows?
are up. Believe me, my kids celebrated when they sold their Verizon truck.
Okay, good. I'm
I
glad to
think
hear that.
Verizon got scared.
No, they definitely did. How long ago did they have the lines up? Any idea?
I'd say a couple of weeks.
They
Okay.
work almost every week.
Okay. All right, it'll probably, with that being said, it'll probably be much earlier than what the initial time frame was. I actually, and LaShawn has it, I had submitted publicly the phase listing, phase 1 through 4. But given the fact that they got lines up is a really good sign. My guess is we'll have it done by the end of the summer or August, but I'll certainly look into it and see where things are. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, committee member.
The only thing I have, Mayor, I was approached by the superintendent of Wharton. It's quite an honor, actually. He would like to name the new parcel of Wharton State Forest off of Eric's Causeway. He would like to have a little input from the community, and he wants to name it something to do, like name it as some kind of reserve, or however we would wish it, being it's our community. Something to do with Tabernacle that sticks out with the area. So I think the input of this committee, maybe at one of the next workshop meetings, put it in the back of all your minds to think about. I think that would be quite an honor.
Put it out to bid. The highest bidder gets it. It's like naming a building. Why not?
They don't park that day.
Then we can pay for Cranes Road.
And that's all I have, Mayor.
I'm not kidding.
Deputy Mayor?
The other thing I have is the only reason I went forward with the motions for both of those roads is the fact that we are giving the money back. We're leaving money on the table because Dan did discuss this a couple meetings ago about going, correct me if I'm wrong,
We did.
about doing this, and none of us said a word about not moving forward, so I thought it was a disservice to the gentleman that's out there and prepared all the time doing it, to not at least put it out there for a vote. And understanding that everybody sitting here, I don't think anyone sitting at this table does not want to get Carranza Road done. I think there's one person sitting here who does not want that done. It's just a matter of getting there and getting it done. And, you know, it'd been so much easier had Chemung worked along with us. It had been done already. So it's very disheartening that they don't want to give a little and everybody's going to benefit from it. So, like I said, there's not anyone here that doesn't want the road done. It's just Chemung has not cooperated, and I understand what Dan was saying, and the fact that Dan said it's not even as if we could have modified these to say Carranza Road. I mean, if that was the case, then we would have sat here and said, modify and make it Carranza Road, let two of them go in together.
That's why I asked that question.
And that's why I reiterated before I made the motion that we couldn't change it.
I guess the thing I'm challenged with is the fact that, you know, we didn't really, I don't think that we did our due diligence enough in kind of hammering Dan, saying, okay, what does this really mean? We never really had a vote to say, okay, do we want to do a grant proposal for Carranza Road, knowing that we're doing Chemung's Road? I guess my point is I kind of wish we vetted that out somewhere. I'll take responsibility for that, for not raising the question. And I concur with you. It's Dan did a lot of work put together. But for me, it's a principle. It's a principle.
That's why.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt you for just a moment? Rodney's been diligently crunching the numbers over here.
You play with the numbers long enough, you figure it out.
That's what counts, too.
And he has indicated that the refund that's due and owing the halls is comprised of 80% of a $203 building permit application fee, or $162.40. And the cost of the state,
Certificate of,
yeah,
no,
$75.
the state's not, state's zero.
Yeah. So,
The certificate of occupancy, it's 100% of that.
right, which is returned, right?
Yeah.
So it comes to $237.40, which is the amount of the resolution.
Thanks, Rodney.
You're welcome.
You want to pull that off the table and take action on it, or?
Can I remake a motion?
The mayor has to read first.
Would you like to make a motion to withdraw your motion?
I did.
Okay, you did, good.
Already went through the part, but what you need to do is, and for Robert's Rules of Order, you need to go back to the resolution and read again. And then we'll-
Okay, so we're going to revisit Resolution 2019-91, which is authorized the Finance Department to refund the construction permit in the amount of $237.40.
Which is reflected in
And now that we have a good explanation of how we arrived at that number, have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, back to committee reports. The only thing I want to say about these two grants is that we still do have a discretionary grant application with the NJDOT that hasn't been acted on by the legislators, and hopefully they will act in our favor on that, and if they do, Carranza Road will get paid. If not, we'll have to revisit this at another date and time. As far as the rest of my report, I received a communication from the attorney who represents Allenwood Estates, and he basically says that he reviewed our Chapter 10 of our ordinance and feels that we're not compliant with current HUD laws, and he gives us a pretty good reasoning as to why. So we'll schedule this for the September workshop meeting. We can take a look at this and see what we need to do to bring our ordinances into compliance.
If anything.
Yeah, if anything. But I'll give it to you and Doug to take a look at.
All right, great.
Also, I received a communication from John McCormick, who's the mayor of Woodbridge. And evidently Woodbridge hosts the Senior Olympics And the Senior Olympics is going to be September 6th, 7th, and 8th. If anyone is interested, I'll leave the book with Sean. If any seniors have interest in participating in Senior Olympics.
I'm not sure that Sandra qualifies.
No, I don't think he does. Okay. And then the only other thing I have to report, I was fortunate that through the New Jersey Conference of Mayors, I was invited to the White House this past Tuesday for the Northeast State Leadership Day. And President Trump is inviting elected officials from all the states and groups for briefings to basically tell us what his administration is doing and request feedback. And I'll just list the many staff and cabinet members that made presentations. Doug Holschler, who's the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Joe Grogan, Assistant to the President and Director of Domestic Policy. Kendall Ehrlich, she's the Assistant Director for External Affairs, Office of National Drug Control Policy. Wendy Lasco, Deputy Executive Director for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Stan Gibbon, he's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Grant Programs for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also heard from Larry Kudlow. He's the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, and he's the Director to the White House National Economic Council. I'd say of everyone that spoke, he was most impressive. I've seen him on Meet the Press and on interview by Chris Wallace. Kate O'Scanlan, she's the Solicitor for Labor, U.S. Department of Labor. And then we also heard from Ann Reinke. She's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs, United States Department of Transportation. Ken Humphreys, Senior Advisor to the Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy with the U.S. Department of Energy. Jennifer McLean, and she's the Acting Director of the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And we heard from Secretary Wilbur Ross, who also was very impressive. He's the U.S. Department of Commerce. And finally, Rogan, the Assistant Secretary for Elementary and Secondary Education from the U.S. Department of Education. So it was a very educational trip, and they actually gave us context for all the agencies at the White House. With that concludes my report. We'll take public comment. If anyone from the public has any comments, please come forward. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Stuart Brooks, Mooresmeadow Road. So first I want to respond to the palpable frustration that was expressed by Mayor Barton and others regarding seemingly leaving money on the table. Mayor Brown sort of hit the nail on the head, as did Mr. Lee. But I can tell you the frustration is equally on our side. I've been appearing before you almost every meeting, almost all the time, raising issues of Carranza Road, asking what your plans are, asking questions 3 meetings ago about issues regarding bonding, which is a follow-up to Committeeman Moore's question on bonding. And I followed up the meeting after. So it's not until today, tonight, that Mr. Haynes responds with information on that you collectively were just dead silent on for 3 months. So I resent hearing how disappointed you are in not getting your act together to get a plan to pave Carranza Road. Because this has been in your lap for years. The fact that it's in such bad shape is due to the fact that it's been lacking repair for years. And the fact that it's in a split jurisdiction is seemingly a perfect reason to put a grant together to the state to say, we can't bond for this, perhaps, because it's in 2 jurisdictions, so we need state aid. But that comment wasn't even in the application to the state. So I'm real frustrated. And frankly, I don't accept your explanations for why you haven't gotten this done in 2 years. I think you've had plenty of time to work on it. It's been set before you respectfully, angrily, in every way possible. And it just doesn't seem to work. So I'm frustrated as well. My other comment, I would recommend, strongly recommend, that you keep your professionals here to the end of all the meetings. Mr. Guzzi didn't get the benefit of my comments regarding the shortcomings that I saw in the applications to the state. I referred to them again this evening. That's the third reference I've made. I don't want to be overly critical to Mr. Guzzi, but I do think, as I've said before, we didn't come close to putting our best foot forward in making the best application possible. I think it was one of the weakest applications possible for some of the reasons I've expressed and for others that I don't think I have the 3 minutes to go into. But the fact that Mr. Guzzi and your other professionals, I believe too, except for Mr. Lang, are allowed to leave before the end of the meeting, which typically happens when you go into executive session, hamstrings them, and it tells us, the public, you don't care. I'm offended at that. Lastly,
Thank you, Mr. Brooks, your time is up.
I realize that. You committed to having Chief put on the agenda for his report and giving you a written statement for his report, and that wasn't done today. I would recommend that the quarterly reports be listed as reports of professionals. He is a professional, and that he prepare a written report that he gives to you in time so that we can also ask him questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Mrs. Brooks?
I'd like to quickly, Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road, follow up on some of Stuart's comments. First of all, we're going to have to pay Mr. Guzzi for his work on those 2 applications to the state. Now, if the deadline was a week ago, how come those projects weren't started sooner so that they appeared on an earlier agenda? And these issues that were reviewed today, and I want to thank Mr. Moore and Mr. Lee for voting against those applications, because nothing adds up with regard to your road program. But if things had been properly organized and scheduled, those 2 applications wouldn't have gone in before there were resolutions on the table before you. But they did, and so now he's prepared them, and the residents of Tabernacle are going to have to pay for that work, which we should never really have to assume, because the scheduling was so faulty here. And everything regarding this road program has been a pain in the behind because of the way it's been handled. That sits at your desk, Mr. Barton. It sits at your feet because this is not being focused on properly. And we've brought it up, all of these issues, week after week after week, meeting after meeting after meeting for the last 3 years. And there's been no proper organization. And it is really tiring, and it's really offensive to listen to the comments about how leaving money on the table. The other thing I'd like to bring up is the OEM issue. I know at the last meeting there was a vote taken that the OEM should be replaced, as in there should be a new employee because Mr. Sunbury is coming on the committee beginning January 2020. Now, the thing about that is Mr. Sunbury has never served on Township Committee. He has no training whatsoever, other than doing his OEM work. He needs to be trained. He needs to be focused on that. For him to hold 2 positions is really a mistake. And we're paying $5,000 a year to people to learn as they go, and it's very offensive. So he should not, that position of OEM should really be replaced. You should get a new employee, as was discussed by Mr. Lee, I think at the last meeting or the meeting before, and make sure that anyone who comes on this committee gets proper training to handle all the municipal issues that are face an elected official. The other point I'd just like to make is that as far as the proposed ordinance 2019-7 regarding the executive session minutes, there is an inherent conflict in that ordinance, and I discussed it with my attorney. I believe that my attorney has contacted Mr. Lang. It needs to be corrected. It has to do with item 2, and there shouldn't be a conflict in terms of the number of times during the year that closed session minutes are reviewed. It was agreed in the consent order that it would be quarterly, but it's still in this old resolution, and now it's in this ordinance, that it's gonna be done on an as-needed basis. And that's sloppy work as far as I'm concerned, that it would even show up, because the consent order is absolutely crystal clear about how often closed session meeting minutes are to be reviewed. So it's time to get a little bit less sloppy on these issues.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public portion. Motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I got a question.
Sure.
And Mrs. Brooks just brought it up. Have we advertised for this position yet, the OEM position?
And not,
Why?
I couldn't really think of.
Okay.
Peter, you want to comment on it, from the legal perspective, as far as why we haven't advertised for the position, and where that is for Mr. Sunbury?
Well, I can speak to process. I took a cursory review of that issue, and then contacted or looked at the case law concerning how such conflicts of interest are resolved. Unless there's been a specific conflict that's been litigated to the courts in a reported decision, there's no real authority other than the actual statutes themselves, whether it be the local government ethics law, the vacancy and law, and the incompatibility of that office statute. So there's very little direct authority. However, there are advisory opinions that are readily granted by the local finance board as to whether duality of an office constitutes any type of conflict from a public perspective. And so they like that process, and it's my understanding that that process is ongoing. So.
Okay. And also, Mr. Sudbury is an employee of this township, and he's really not an elected official into that position until after the election in November. There could be a write-in, there could be a possibility that he could lose that election. So it would be premature to advertise for a position that may not exist.
That may be an opinion, Mayor, but the committee voted 4-1. You were the dissenting vote. The committee voted 4-1 to advertise the position. The advertising the position does not mean we're committed to the people that apply. The reason that I asked for the motion, and I think part of the reason we had a 4-1 vote, was because it starts the process of at least getting applicants that can apply. It doesn't mean we have to hire anybody. It means we get applications. And we can at least have a bank of applications to go to once we get this opinion that Pete's referring to, and once the election's complete. And that's the direction that was given by the committee. If you've got a different opinion, you're giving the direction to Doug and to Pete to do something different. That's outside of what the committee voted to do. But at the very, excuse me, I'm talking. At the very least, the committee gave direction for advertising for this position to happen. And that hasn't happened, as I understand it. That's a direct violation of the direction of the committee. At the very least, irregardless of anything else, we ought to have the advertising done to get at least an applicant pool to go to once we get an opinion from Pete and once the election's complete. And if we're not going to do that, then I don't know why we're even doing this. Because if we're not going to respond to direction from the committee, then what's the point of us even having a committee? It's disappointing.
I did not provide any direction not to advertise. I did question, since Mr. Sudbury is an employee of this township, does that action impede his rights as an employee?
To advertise for a position that could potentially be filled? That's all we're doing, we're advertising. We're not saying we're firing Bob, we can't fire Bob. We're not saying Bob is leaving, but advertising, that's harmless, is it not? Am I missing something, Pete?
You can advertise for a position that may or may not be available.
Right. That's all we gave that direction, and that was written in the resolution. That ought to happen tomorrow.
No problem, I'll take care of it.
Thank you, LaShawn.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call? All in favor?